You've decided to come join us this morning for the annual Carl A. Scott Lecture. This is the second of three sort of anchor events here at the Council on Social Work Education. Last night's opening was the first, and we have an international speaker tomorrow. So I'm just really pleased and welcome. So I will now turn this over to Dr. Kudar Snell, who is from Howard University. He was the Dean of the School of Social Work for some time, and now he's the Vice Provost for International Programs at the university. And he is going to represent Howard, who is a sponsor of this event, longtime supporter of this event, and certainly the Carl A. Scott Lecture and the book scholarship. And so Dr. Snell will have some announcements to make about the book scholarship awardees. So Dr. Snell.
Good morning. I would like to recognize and thank my Dean, Dr. Sandra E. Crew from Howard University School of Social Work. Is Dean Crew here? She'll come later, I'm sure. But we thank her for her support in sponsoring the Carl Scott Memorial Lecture on behalf of Howard University. Thanks in her absence, but we'll thank her when she arrives. We have an outstanding lecture planned this morning. But before we begin, I want to spend a few minutes highlighting Mr. Carl A. Scott's important contributions. Carl received a BA in psychology and an MSW degree in 1954 from Howard University. After serving in various practice and administrative positions in children and family service agencies, Carl joined the New York University School of Social Work, where he served as Director of Admissions and Assistant Professor. Mr. Scott joined the Council on Social Work Education in 1968 as a senior consultant on minority groups when the main office was in New York City. He retired in 1985 as the Associate Executive Director. Carl developed CSWE's two minority fellowship programs in 1974 with funding from the National Institute of Mental Health. To date, well over 600 African Americans, Asian Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, and Puerto Ricans completed doctoral level social work study. Many of these fellowship recipients now serve as deans, directors, and faculty in social work programs throughout the nation. Carl was a superb academic, administrator, colleague, and mentor. He passed away in 1986, and in recognition of his contributions to CSWE and the profession, the CSWE Board of Directors established the Carl A. Scott Memorial Lecture Fund in that same year. Carl was at the helm of CSWE's early efforts to foster human diversity in social work education. He was a pioneer in obtaining scholarships for students from ethnic groups of color. Of special note are the Minority Fellowships Program for doctoral students to prepare mental health researchers and leaders in teaching and mental health services. The Carl A. Scott Memorial Fund was developed to continue the legacy of equity and social justice in social work through knowledge building and furthering the well-being of individuals and their communities. These were the goals to which Carl devoted his life's work. Since 1988, the fund has sponsored a lecture at the CSWE annual program meeting. The first 5 of these lectures, edited by the late Dr. Dorothy Pearson, former professor at Howard University School of Social Work, comprise the contents of a volume entitled Perspectives on Equity and Justice. Dr. Aracelis Francis, who retired from CSWE, for years served as staff liaison for the Memorial Fund. Dr. Francis is in the house. Will you please stand and be acknowledged, Dr. Francis? Dr. Francis was followed by Dr. Geraldine Meeks, who was the director of the Minority Fellowship Programs. After Dr. Meeks, we had Dr. Jenny Jones, who was the Dr. Jenny Jones is in the house. Let's acknowledge her. The current MFP director is Dr. Llewellyn. I don't know if he's here. Okay. Thank you. The associate director is Tabitha A. Beck. The program assistant is Gladys Mendez. And Stephanie McNally, manager of the Social Work Fellowship Recognition Program. I know Stephanie's here. Thank you. Another activity of the Memorial Fund is the awarding of book scholarships to highly qualified social work students. The Carl Scott Book Scholarships provide 2 annual $500 book scholarships to bachelor or master social work students in the final year of their program who are committed to addressing issues of social justice. The Memorial Fund depends upon donations. Please consider making a donation today. Donations can be made via cash or check or by credit card, or I think there's also an online facility on the website, cswe.org. I think we also sometimes have donation flyers somewhere at the back. In the past, we used to pass a hat, but we decided not to do that this year. It is my pleasure to announce the Carl A. Scott Book Scholarship awardees for this year. The winners are Morgan McCroy and Audra Attaway. Morgan McCroy is a second-year MSW student at the University of Maryland, Baltimore City. She will graduate in May 2020. After graduation, Ms. McCrory hopes to continue working with children and families. More specifically, she would like to continue working with the Child Advocacy Center, either in Prince George's County or at the Tree House in Montgomery County. Please join me in applauding and congratulating Ms. McCrory. I don't know if she's here or not. Our second winner is Audrey Attaway. She's a senior social work student at Northern Arizona University, the Yuma branch campus in Yuma, Arizona. Ms. Attaway plans to enter an advanced standing MSW program with a concentration in administration and policy practice in summer of 2020. Please join me in congratulating Ms. Attaway. We would like to express thanks to the CSWE Education Division staff for their work in identifying the winners. Thank you. In addition, I'd like to recognize our regular reviewers who've agreed to do the reviews for us this year. We have our regulars, and they are here in the audience with us today. We have Dr. Robert Ortega from the University of Michigan. I know he was here, yes. Dr. Ruby Gordine from Howard University School of Social Work. Dr. Sadie Logan, Professor Emeritus from the University of South Carolina. Edward Mullen from Columbia University. Dr. Crystal Coles from the University of Kansas. Dr. Lisa Gray from Regis College. And Dr. Isak Kim from the University of Buffalo. They are not here, but Dr. Ortega always comes and supports us, so we're very happy to have you. We would also like to recognize our current Minority Fellowship Program colleagues in the audience. Our Carl A. Scott lecturer is also a former recipient of the MFP, but are our current recipients here? Will they please stand so we can acknowledge them? I know we also have past recipients of the MFP program here. Can you please stand? I saw some folks here who were past recipients. Yeah. Good. I would now like to introduce the following individuals as I call them up to the podium. Dr. Michael Robinson is the chair of the Commission for Diversity and Social and Economic Justice. Dr. Robinson is an associate professor of social work at the University of Georgia. Dr. Jenny Jones, former chair of the Commission for Diversity and Social and Economic Justice. Dr. Jenny Jones is the Dean and Professor at the Whitney Young School of Social Work at Clark Atlanta University. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. All right, I know you're out there. It is actually my pleasure this morning to stand before you and introduce our newest award that came about under the Commission for Diversity and Social and Economic Justice, the Community Partnership Award. The purpose of this award was really looking at advancing community partnerships to individuals and schools that do work that is reflective of Carl A. Scott, with a focus on social and economic justice. The community partnerships are central to the advancement of social and economic justice, which is intrinsic to social work education. Historically, dating back to the settlement houses, our profession is rooted in working with the community to solve problems and issues. Community partnerships enhance social justice work by engaging meaningful reciprocal collaborations. These activities also develop connections between theory and practice in real-life contexts toward promoting social, economic, and environmental justice. The first award is the award is given to an individual in School of Social Work that meets this criteria. Our first award ever, inaugural award for this community partnership goes to the Ohio State University in age-friendly Columbus, Franklin County. Are they here? Anybody from Ohio State? And while they're coming, let me just share a little bit with you about what they wrote in this nomination letter. Central Ohio's 65 and older population will double by 2050. Leadership of the Ohio State University College of Social Work and others in Columbus is one of the nation's foremost cities embracing age-friendly experiences. Launched in 2016, Age-Friendly Columbus and Franklin County is a 5-year research-driven initiative working in a highly collaborative way with residents of all ages and abilities to improve the quality of life in Central Ohio and document the impact of the community-engaged programming. The initiative supports the redesign of the built social and service environment for an aging population and reconceptualizes older adults as partners and assets rather than problems to be solved. AFCFC is housed in a low-income neighborhood recreation center rather than the Ohio State campus. Students who participate in diverse educational opportunities are housed within the community among the residents. So this, the Ohio State University and the age-friendly Columbus and Franklin County exemplify the description that I read to you about community partnerships. And at this time, we would like to present you with this lovely award, Tom Gregoire and your faculty. Oh, you have it already. We want to say thank you for the work that you do. Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Such an honor.
I'll wait next time.
All right. Thank you all very much for the work.
I'll wait next time.
Okay. This second award goes to an individual for their work around community partnerships. Dr. Suk-hee Kim is an assistant professor in the Department of Counseling, Social Work, and Leadership, College of Education and Human Services at Northern Kentucky University. Dr. Kim currently works with the Kenton County Detention Center, and the center is taking on the task of prevention with innovative new programs and intervention around opioid abuse. My community, Dr. Kim states, my community partner is my former research student. We launched the Kentucky Overdose Prevention Education and Pre-Arrest Diversion Project aimed at preventing overdose through enhanced treatment access. This partnership allows my students to be key players. They have brilliant and innovative ideas, and they are building critical skills and applying knowledge learned in the classroom to big real-world ideas. My former students and current students are at the jails every week, working closely with inmates, trying to get them back on their feet. They have created a 12-step reentry plan for opioid addictions. I cannot say enough about this work that Dr. Kim is doing. And at this time, I would like to ask Dr. Kim to come up front. So now we're ready to We would like to award you with this, with the Community Partnership Award for individual work. We thank you for the work that you're doing, and we know that it is making a difference in the community. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Michael Robinson, who is going to introduce our Carl A. Scott lecturer for the morning.
I had to make an adjustment because Dr. Snell has did the complete history of Carl A. Scott. So I had to do a little editing. So our speaker for today, Dr. Llewellyn J. Cornelius, is an alumnus of the Minority Fellowship Program, 1988. He is one of the examples of the living legend of Carl A. Scott. In the short time that I have today, I cannot do justice, no pun intended, to the influence Dr. Cornelius has continued to have in the areas of social and economic justice, locally and globally. I expect that if I read his 34-page CV here at the podium, as well as his many accolades, it would cut his lecture time down to around 15 minutes. Therefore, I will mention a few things that are not so obvious. The things that he does behind the scenes, both with everyday people and on the national and international stage. For example, in the last 14 years, he has served in leadership positions on 2 federal advisory committees that influence the lives of researchers and practitioners around the U.S. He sits on the Population Health Subcommittee for the National Committee on Vital Health Statistics, the advisory committee to the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, where, among other things, they steward the discussion regarding both the rolling out of the upcoming ICD-11 medical codes and the interface with the DSM-5, something that affects us all. On the other hand, on the local level, he is regularly asked to use his skills in cultural and community work to build bridges between the community and the academy, as in the current conflict in Athens community. He is now with the University of Georgia regarding the slave remains that were uncovered under Baldwin Hall. On the interpersonal level, if you have ever witnessed Dr. C, as we call him, at either APM or SWE, you can easily find him off on the side, maybe talking to a student or another faculty member, offering advice, and sometimes just a listening ear. And I know this because I saw both him and his mentor, which is Dr. Francis here, in Dublin at an international social work conference, and they were both off to the side talking to a student, offering advice and support. I know my time is running out, so I will end by saying that having peeked at his slide deck, I can easily see the mosaic of his life that exemplifies what the Carl A. Scott Award is about, as reflected by his passion for social justice and the need to get at power differentials, to build bridges between mainstream and those who have been mistreated in society. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Cornelius.
Are they going to take a picture of us here? Brother.
Bring it in.
Well, a great morning. A great morning to everyone. Before, first, okay, no. I'm sorry. Am I the only one that thinks it's a good morning? Yes. So actually, first, I'm going to put my hand up and say, first of all, did you hear President Sorrell last night? All I have to say before I begin, I'm going to put my right hand up and say, Your Honor, I wrote these remarks before last night. I was like, wow. You know, the beautiful thing, because you'll see as we travel, I was kind of thinking about it last night. I'm like, wow, once is a coincidence and two is a trend. So we'll see by the time we finish that there's going to be some nice overlaps. Now, of course, I'm going to start with the introductions. First, I'm going to start by thanking President Coffey, the Howard University Assistant Provost, Dr. Snell, Dr. Robinson behind me, Dean Jones, Dean Chiat. You know I'm doing the protocol stuff, right? And I'll say next the MFP Nation of fellows and alums. What do you call 650 leaders? No, they're not just people. We're a nation. My loving family and friends, my academic family here, all for creating a space for all of us to excel, to be the best we can be to our students, colleagues, and the community. Now, congrats to my colleagues here as well who have received awards for their stellar social justice activities. And also, it's wow. I also need to put my heart out for the Lifetime Achievement Awardee, Dr. Iris Carlton-Lene, who I have to say, just like me being in the hallway, she's been spending time all these years supporting us all, and I know I've called her up sometimes for some leadership support. So even though she's going to be here later on in the weekend, it's worth being here for her as well. Now, before I begin, I want to express my gratitude spiritually for even being able to be here in front of you and present, as every moment that we're here is not our own. I do not take a second that I'm on earth and that we're on earth for granted, as much as we like to think it is. Now, I also want to honor the indigenous populations here in Colorado, the First Nations people, and the Latinx community that were on this very soil in Colorado before it became a state. Within that same space, I want to honor my own familial and cultural ancestors who have passed on to my family the spirit that I share with you. Now, I have just these little scribble notes. There's actually, you notice there's a protocol activity going on, and after the presentation, there'll be some more pictures and so on. I just made a note, there are people that I've met and talked to over the years. If you end up bum rushing the stage after the formal pictures for us to take group pictures, this event isn't about me, it's about us. So I want you to come on up and have us do our thing and provide, lots of sharing. Now, I am humbled and appreciative of having the opportunity to take a few moments to share with you some thoughts on how we can continue to push the envelope in the name of social and economic justice. I took on the challenge of focusing on a topic that is really the opposite of what we typically award and cherish in academia. That is, we receive praise for what we do and what we tell others we do. That's what we end up doing in academia, as opposed to merely just being part of the groundswell of social change that others are leading. I'm also aware that even as part of this presentation, I will engage in some of that academic promotion. However, I'm far, far less concerned about the part of the presentation I'll do now about academic promotion, where I get to tell you some things about myself and also about the ensemble work at the University of Georgia, as I am about the central message. Now, the key point that I'd like to emphasize in our time today is that I will use a variety of terms to talk about how we promote social change. For example, allyship, advocacy, empowerment. I'm actually here, though, to make a gentle nudge for some and a hard shove for others to ask that we step up and take on the task of self-liberation, as well as joining in others who are engaged in liberation efforts. I will use both personal and academic examples to make this case. So are you ready for the key takeaway message? Ready? Okay. Turn to your neighbor and say the following. You ready? It's not about me. Like I said, we're going to have a call response like the president did last night. Now, of course, all right, now that you got it, you can all go out for breakfast. Just kidding, just want to see what, they're like, are you serious? Looking around, he's joking. Now, for those of you who are part of the high-tech generation, you might be spending the next 40 minutes texting while I'm talking, but I got it. Now, seriously though, I will be emphasizing in different ways that liberation is in part the work we do on our true self-humility and dealing with overcoming self-oppression, and on the other end, truly getting out of the way of helping those who are on their own self-determination journey, and simply asking this question: how can I help? Now, I know this sounds simple and runs against the grain of all that you are trained to do as a student and a professor. After all, we reward our students for good grades. We reward you with promotion and tenure. You see where I'm going? Yeah, let's see what happens here. Cool. I'm going to leave the presentation goes slide up and talk while that's in front of you. Now, having stated the key message here, I will focus on using different ways to drive the point home. So let's get started. And you see the goals contextualizing the key terms. I will do this repeatedly. I'll talk about social justice liberation and so on. Now, you may note that I didn't start with me. I started spiritually. I thanked our ancestors and so on. In the a, his, her, their historical, notice I purposely put the continuum out here intentionally. It's like what King Solomon said: there's nothing new under the sun. So it can't be about me. It really can't. Which is fascinating, because academia is built on the pretense that we are all creating something new. Now, I'm definitely going to be giving you a rallying call. It's going to be like a sandwich. I'm going to talk about some things after I do the intro about the university and so on. I'm going to give you a rallying call. We'll talk about some articles in social justice and then come back to the space about the future. And in that, I'll provide some comments regarding liberation. But first, I'll leave you with this quote. I'll start with this quote from Shakespeare that passes prologue as a gentle reminder that while in our quest to make it seem that it is about us, we overlook wisdom from the past. We need to balance the wisdom of the past with the novelty and innovation of the present and future. I remember Marion Wright Edelman one time at Morehouse College talking. She said a very fascinating thing. She mentioned to the audience, as older adults, we need to be just as open as that 5-year-old saying something very wonderful that we need to hear as we are about advising that young soul about the importance of ancestry on who they will become. And so part of that is that we have to understand wisdom comes from many places. And that's this whole thing about past is prologue. And I'm going to work through that as we spend some time together. Now, speaking of past is prologue, in defining what it means to be a liberator, I offer you Che Guevara. In talking about his frontline work countering oppression and neo-colonialism, Che said, "I am not a liberator. Liberators do not exist. People will liberate themselves." Now, I actually give a twist to this. Now, but actually, before I say that, in this discussion, what we're dealing with is the power and our potential roles as oppressors. As in essence, we're trying to understand that I can't do anything to help somebody else overcome what they are going through. They have to do it themselves. Now, my twist to this idea of the quote is really saying, you know what I can do is get out of my own way. Because, sometimes I'm the problem. As a matter of fact, I mention at least 2 times a day on that problem for my family, and both at work and home. I get it. I own it. Sometimes I get in my own way. And it's important for us to own that, because sometimes, the better thing to do is just not to say anything. As well, right? So the central point here is that we have to be very careful about folk responding to our power and title. I'm standing in an audience with people who have power. You all have power. I say to our students, even in their first week at school, it's like, you know what? Do you understand when you go out there and you're in an agency, in a field placement, these clients see you as a person with power. You might not see yourself, but they do. And with that comes power and privilege. And we have to understand what that is. So, pause for a moment. I mentioned that I'm going to cover some things. And so the next thing I get to do as I move forward is what I call product placement. Yeah. It's like Wayne's World or seeing ads on TV, for example. Now, actually, I'm going to start. I want you to learn about who I am. This slide, best way to think about this slide is I'm going to go from left to right. On the top, I'm going to go across. Then I'm going to go down to the bottom and across. So I actually learned this is a nice way to tell someone in a couple minutes about who I am. So first, in the top left-hand corner where you see the green and the 3 sisters there, and actually this is something that my mentor, Dr. Aristelis Francis, will know as a fellow Virgin Islander, is that this is a depiction of what was called the Fire Burn Revolt in St. Croix in Frederiksted in 1878, where these 3 sisters and the folk in Frederiksted got tired of the Danish colonizers running amok over their lives. And so the three queens are Queen Agnes, Queen Mary, and Queen Matilda. Now, Virgin Islanders today use this symbol to remind each of us of our commitment to self-determination. I actually heard a podcast last month where a guy named Peter Bailey was talking to folk about how Virgin Islanders should be responding to the hurricanes and what they should be doing as opposed to waiting for other people to do it. So that says 1878, but it says 2019 at the same time. So next to that you see is the train trestle says La Maqueta. Well, that is over the train tracks of what is Metro North, the thoroughfare in El Barrio in East Harlem, New York City, where I grew up, that had both African descendants, Latinx descendants, and also Italian Americans live in East Harlem. Now, I lived not far from that particular object in a slum tenement that was cold in the winter, hot in the summer. That was a great place in the 1920s, but by the 1960s, when I was growing up, was a sinkhole. And to that point, actually, I was watching a wonderful documentary by Ken Burns of Senator Robert Kennedy. And here you have Senator Robert Kennedy in Bed-Stuy, Bedford-Stuyvesant, as opposed to do-or-die Bed-Stuy for the New Yorkers. I have a New Yorker over here that knows what I'm saying. Brooklyner, I'm sorry, did I get it right? Yeah, see? So they show this wonderful film of, the very charismatic Senator Kennedy going around the Brooklyn tenements because, talked about the sinkhole I lived in, right? He was dealing with a first private and nonprofit building activity to convert 400 tenements in the slum area of Brooklyn. But the point about this was that there was a community worker who faced the camera and said, you know what? We're sick and tired of, quote, helpers coming to help us on their way to the next headline. And I looked at it, I was like, was this 1965? Or was this 2019? Because in the community, this is the same thing we hear right now. I was like, oh, wow. Even though, we we love Senator Kennedy and what have you, what he was saying is, you want to help us, let us do what we can do for ourselves. So now, directly below that train trestle is a blue and white symbol there, and actually stands for the National Federation of Settlements and Neighborhood Centers. I actually worked there for a summer as a high school student, and I did not know that it was a National Social Service organization. But that's not the point. The point is very few of you actually know of this thing today. And the point that I mention is, so this organization, if you think about the Henry Street settlement, you think about Jane Addams, you think about all these things about settlements, played a very important role in social service delivery. Yet people don't know about it today. And the point is, we have to be very careful about the icons of organizations that may seem to be the hot buzz, wherever we're doing in the community, wherever that is, and disappear. That piece about sustaining us is very critical. So let's keep going. Now, to the right, the black and white photo actually is a symbol over a bookstore in Harlem that we used to call UCLA, the University at the corner of Lenox Avenue. Because it wasn't just a bookstore. People gathered. Matter of fact, if you seen the movie Malcolm X, there's a scene where you see several podiums lined up on then what's called Lenox Avenue, just saying, and they were speaking and preaching and giving knowledge. So part of what I'm helping you to do is understand the soul that's in front of you and whence I came. So now you see we're going to go down to the left again, and starting with the orange and blue, we have symbols of Syracuse University. We have the symbol next to it of the University of Chicago. There is the symbol next to that, University of Maryland School of Social Work, and then below, the University of Georgia Center for Social Justice and Human Rights. That just gives you the example of the panning of my academic journey. Now, finally on that collage, well, I know, folk at UGA, you do see the arches on the far right. That little black and green thing is actually an iconic symbol of the entrance to the University of Georgia campus. But actually, I'm mentioning that second to last, because in the bottom, what you see are two pictures. One with me and Jerry Adams in Dublin when we went to the International Social Work Conference with a meeting with Sinn Féin at the Leicester's house, in the Legislative House. And also next to that is a picture with some university students and community workers in Abuja, Nigeria, with some of the work that I do on HIV/AIDS. So my smart remark is, I'm a product of my environment. So I mentioned I'm going to do some product placement. And by the way, before I do start with the University of Georgia, thank you, my macro brothers and sisters. I'm going to see, got to be inclusive, right? They gave me the button, macro assist. There's also another, see now, if other people gave me stuff, I would have shared that right now, but I'm just saying. And then you have the anti-racist educators. Now, of course, now you notice that some of us are wearing red and black. I saw this, I'm like, how big can you make this thing? Could you make it any bigger, Dean Shayette? I just wanted to, product placement, yep. Look, I'm never coming back, I'm not doing this again, so I'm just saying. Now, what you'll notice, there are pillars here that talk about the luminary speakers, scholarship, data analytics, social activism, and sustainability. I'm going to go through examples of that in the next few minutes before moving into the whole piece that we have in terms of the main lecture. Now, you may have noticed that some of us was wearing this, I told you, product placement segment, bam! Proceed, right? So you may have noticed that there's some people wearing these beautiful color-coded, yes, color-coded for the University of Georgia, bing. Now, and the point about that with this slide, though, is that I didn't do this. I didn't create Proceed. The faculty at the University of Georgia said, we need to have both a place in a course and throughout the curriculum where we talk about issues of advocacy, empowerment, social justice, and diversity, and make that part of the lived experience, what happens in the classroom and out in the community. And so that's just one of the examples. Second one. So you may remember a year ago at the University of Georgia table, and also then after that in the Journal of Poverty, that we had put an announcement out for a special issue in the Journal of Poverty. And the we in this case, and I don't know if by the way, is Dr. Maria Vidal Vijames with us this morning? Yes. That's one of my co-conspirators at Loyola University, Dr. Maria Vidal Vijames, Stephen Haynes from DePaul, Claudia Lawrence Webb from Morgan State University, and the board of the Journal of Poverty. And basically, we got annoyed and ticked off with this whole activity of the federal government taking apart programs and not really dealing with this issue of structural racism. So what we did is that we put out a special issue, which is moving along and coming out in the spring, that really deals with the policy effects of structural racism and unintended and intended consequences. We actually have another call for papers that's sitting out at the booth that's going to focus on global environmental justice, focusing with some of our partners in Colombia to talk about things like global warming or having garbage dumps right in your neighborhood or, burying nuclear waste like I learned out in Hobbs, New Mexico, in a community that couldn't speak for themselves. So it's really the part of that thing in the social justice, ensemble thing is having a bunch of us come together to really focus on issues that really get to this liberation thing. So this next slide is actually a picture of, on the left facing you is the ensemble of the students that are part of the Student Social Justice Symposium. Dr. Rebecca Matthews, after I came to UGA, said, hey, you know that UC Berkeley has been doing this for 10 years, and we'd like to see if our students would like to do this. Again, all that Dr. Matthew and I do is provide technical assistance. It's the students that do this. And so last year, we had 210 persons in the community for a one-day event, and actually in the Unitarian Church, a non-denominational church that focuses on social justice. So in essence, this is just another example of some ensemble work here. Then there's this thing called reflective structured dialogue. And reflective structured dialogue is basically a peace-building activity where you bring people together, where we learn how to listen and just actively be present. It's actually based on family therapy principles in the 1980s out in the Boston area. And one of the attorneys at the Fanning Institute, Dr. Ray Rawls, had been doing it at UGA for 15 years and had come on to the School of Social Work to join us in what we're doing. Now, what I want to call your attention to, though, is actually on the right side, you see a young African-American man with a phone in his hand. That was actually part of what's called the Blue and You initiative that dealt with the friction between the police in Athens and the African-American community. And what you have is this young man leading that activity, a 9-year-old. And so it isn't just thinking about something that we do. When we say community, right there is the community. So now the central thread that runs through all of these ensemble activities is that multiple parties are needed to promote social justice and human rights. The Proceed initiative focuses directly on the implicit and explicit curriculum we provide in the social work program. The Journal on Poverty Special Issues focuses on scholastic-driven peers to focus on liberation. The Student Social Justice Symposium focuses on students and the communities being drivers of social change, and the Reflective Structured Dialogue focuses on skill building to assist practitioners, helping them develop active listening skills and civility. So now I'm going to do some transition to the main part of our time together. And in this case, I want to focus the presentation on the heart of what I wish to do, which is both to charge you up and also to provide some references on academic scholarship that supports the notion of liberatory education and practice. So you may remember I talked a few minutes earlier about structural liberation and Che Guevara. So the point is interesting in that it is personal and collective. Yet the collective is not just about an academic professional leading the pack. No, that's not what it's about. And being inclusive, I would say that if I saw Che today, I would say as it relates to my academic professional life, I'm not a liberator. I just get up every day and I spend time with people who are on their own liberation. And I'm also involved in my own lifetime liberation. Now, this concept is actually central to what is called liberation psychology. Liberation psychology, quote, helps oppressed communities revive and employ methods used by their ancestors to survive, resist, organize, and strengthen cultural pride and traditions, end quote. So why start here? Well, we start here because the bit about social justice liberation is about us unlearning and unraveling all the things that we learned that tempt us to say, we have the answer. Now, honestly, I don't have the miracle answer. Because if I really had the miracle answer, I don't know, maybe my face would be carved on Mount Rushmore. Or for the Georgia folk, it would be carved on Stone Mountain. You know, next to Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Stonewall Jackson, which would be a hoot with my dreadlocks. Our challenge is that we're here at the peak of our professional and educational life, which is gently nurtured our, quote, expertise through training, scholarship, and so on. And here I am saying that we have to unlearn all of that stuff in order to engage in personal and educational liberation. We'll come back to that in a bit. So first, let's go through the core issues of why this topic is now. On one end, we know that Abraham Flexner had put the social work profession on the defensive in 1915 when he said that we do not contribute to knowledge, and basically we were friendly visitors. And I understand 100 years later, we mapped out our generation of what we were doing in scientific knowledge, practice, and education. Yet all of this was in response to someone else setting our agenda and not us. I'm going to pause. You hear what I'm saying? Self-liberation is about social work casting the future for itself, not about grafting what we are onto other people's paradigms. I know this is hard to hear, but we're family, and family needs to have these type of conversations. Now, while I'm pushing the envelope, let me talk about quote-unquote empowerment. I remember telling people left and right that I was an empowerment freak, because after all, I was proud to be Dr. Donna Franklin's student in the University of Chicago in the mid-1980s when we had Barbara Bryant Solomon's book, Black Empowerment, Social Work in Oppressed Communities. Let's just say it was one of the first publications on it. I'm gonna say that with love. And so here we are all running around, and we got this book, and we're all trying to power up and be empowered, and then somebody put me in check. They said, you know what? It's often we professionals that empower. I said, oops, ouch. I had to own my own power and privilege that was tied up in here. So rather than, as opposed to community self-determination. So since if I'm participating in community liberation, I have to be what? Invited to join others in what they're doing. I have to build and maintain trust with the people that I'm joining, and I have to even accept whatever voice they say, even if they don't want to do anything, which is, one of the comments that I was sharing with Michael about the Baldwin Hall thing, is that, we have to wait on the Athenians in Athens to decide what they want to do. Not all those wonderful people bouncing around the university who want to help because they were there 150 years ago and they'll be there 100 years from now. Just saying. So I'm not saying, though, empowerment is a bad thing. It's at the core of the things, the terms that we use to understand power and energy and how it's shared. Yes, the terms are connected, and yet they're not the same thing. I know some of you will say, hey, Dr. C, aren't you being a tad bit too harsh here? I can't speak for you, though. I can only say that after 34 years of talking about empowerment, I'm ready for liberation. And of course, that hint, it means, though, it's not about me, and I have to get out of my way and get out of other people's way. So I'm going to give you an example. Here's what I mean about getting out of my own way in the name of empowerment. So last summer, I was at an event in the school where we had some middle school African-American children that were on a campus visit. And during that visit, we had the English bulldog named Uga that we sport at our athletic events and represents the pride of the campus. And Uga is also claimed to be one of the favorite college football mascots. Now, for my SCC family, I didn't say that. I saw a sportscaster say it on live TV the other week. So in sharing Uga with the youth, we were feeling good about our outreach and community activity. However, in the midst of all this bonding, one of the youth turned the event on its head. So the youth were asked, well, what do you think about Uga? And he responded, you want to know what I think? I think that that dog lives better than me. He was right, because, first of all, this young man was putting our community empowerment outreach activity right in our face by saying, and here's a comment, you know, Uga is a spoiled dog. If you have some pictures and you just watch the sporting events, he's doing right, okay. Now, but here's the thing. What he was saying to us is that if you really want to help me on this campus, help me live the way that mascot lives, help me financially go to a school where a dog lives better than me. He was a great example of the story of the king's new clothes. Here we are, we're saying all this stuff, and then some child says, oh, you're wearing a birthday suit. So, in essence of what he was trying to say is, you know what? Because out of this mouth came a bold, self-liberating statement of truth. You really want to help me? Can you hook a brother up like that mascot and get me into UGA? I'm like, okay. I see you all haven't left yet. Do I really want to? Yeah. I'm gonna leave this slide up because for some reason it's gonna come back to us. So early in the presentation, I put forth the notion that liberation is reflecting both interpersonal and structural liberation, and we used terms to discuss this bit about change. We talked about power and community self-determination. It's like this quote here with Paulo Freire about praxis, talking about the transformation of the world. And in our case here, we're talking about using theory to make the transformation, yet we're in our space, it's not just theory, it's about practice. And the piece with Guevara tied to it is really us taking reality to and taking a seat back to groups who are doing things so that we can help them. So now, this part of the presentation focuses on issues social work scholars have posed in this space, as well as opinions in the general area of higher education regarding this matter. Now, for this, what I did was I looked at articles in the Journal of Social Work Education from 1998 to 2019, and I pulled four examples of these slides, and I'm just going to leave a conceptual diagram up here for the next few minutes as we talk through this. In summarizing the Journal of Social Work Education articles I reviewed, I would say that social work clustered into the following four areas. Interpersonal relational issues such as expanding our definition of diversity. Second, embracing the concept of intersectionality as a way of examining power inequities within diverse populations. Third, the need to see power and oppression as part of being relevant across the micro-macro continuum. And fourth, encouraging educators to engage in liberatory consciousness. Across the articles, they noted a lack of discussion of the issues of diversity, social action, empowerment, resiliency, and liberation in social work education. They also note a spectrum of commitment to these issues on the part of our students, from no interest to persons being agents of social action. And I would not be surprised if many of us in our programs have tried to deal with that struggle, where a good portion of our students say, I'm not interested in this. I just want to be having a face-to-face client load. And what we're saying in this work is that it's across the whole spectrum, not just in one place. So now I'm going to go through the four articles examples. So first with voting Gallant, in an article entitled Bridging the Gap Between Micro and Macro Practice, they provide a paradigm for us to consider as it relates to interpersonal and structural liberation by examining the issues of culture, power, oppression, and justice. Now, they note that the common thread across the micro and macro continuum is the understanding how power is acknowledged. So on the micro level, it deals with how we provide an understanding in terms of the counselor and the client about this thing of treatment compliance. For the macro side, it deals with the issue of power systems and how they subjugate people. In the classroom process, the power dynamic may be expressed by creating, are you ready, a competitive environment as opposed to a cooperative learning environment. Moving on to the second article here, Critical Race Theory, a transformational model for teaching diversity, which focuses on understanding the structural and interpersonal forces that thwart, embrace, or hinder respect for human diversity. By the way, is Larry Ortiz here this morning? So, he didn't know I was going to call him out. Oh, there you go. That's his article. Just see, I love you, Larry. Just want to let you know. So here in this article reflects on the need for social work education and practice to cast the issue of diversity within a broad context. They note that some of the discussion of diversity has not adequately addressed the evolving nature of diversity in the United States. So they pose this concept of critical race theory as an approach that can be used to bridge the gap. And they also note that critical race theory, quote, often a liberatory transformation response to racial, gender, and class oppression. And finally, they share with us that the use of critical race theory in social work education can lead to transformative social work practice. In the third article I want to share with you, Social Justice and the Research Continuum by Longress and Scanlon, they examine whether, quote unquote, justice can be infused into the curriculum, in this case the research curriculum, without jeopardizing the goal of objectivity, a goal that is central to the scientific method and scientific research. Now, in their study, they noted that that the faculty interviewed often found themselves at a loss when asked about the definition of social justice. They tended to free associate, come up with broad concepts such as fairness, equity, parity, and equalizing. At the same time, faculty expressed a commitment to contributing to social justice through research, and I'll say, quote, however, some faculty members made a distinction between social action on behalf of justice and a more passive research commitment, end quote. The final article I'll mention today from the Journal of Social Work Education is the one entitled Teaching Intersectionality, Transforming Cultural Competence in Social Work Education by Dr. Robinson, who's back there, Denny Lee. None of these people knew anything about what I was going to say. They didn't even know. Lee, Rosas, and Yamada, in their teaching note, they highlighted the importance of examining the intersection of power and privilege within the arrays of populations that are near and dear to social work. They note the lack of infusion of this paradigm, in particular paradigm of intersectionality, in social work education, and also particularly the notions of students needing to unlearn frames of references, and I'm making aside students and us, that inhibit them from examining power differentials, them and us. They suggest, and that them and us is me, that wasn't in the article, just to let you know. I don't want to get in trouble with you. They suggest that this can occur through experiential and learning activities. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't just want to look at the Journal of Social Work Education. I wanted to look at some things in the Chronicle. Now, I looked at material over a 2-year period, and first I'm going to summarize that and go through some examples. Overall, the articles that opinion pieces, by the way, were presented emphasized the need for strong leadership at the presidential level of universities. Did I not say last night was a great example of that? A president of a university executing strong leadership. The president's use of power to speak on and off campus. did that too, and to speak on behalf of social justice issues, did that as well. On the collegiate level, there were also discussions regarding the need to sensitize ourselves to the needs of low-income first-generation students. We talked about that as well, just saying. And also the need to create inclusive conversational space on campus. So first, I'm going to talk about the, let me make sure you have these little pictures. There you go. Now, the picture on the right is just to give you the example of Kimbrough's opinion piece. So in the Chronicle on Higher Education, he wrote an opinion piece entitled 50 Years After the Civil Rights Movement, A Challenge to Leadership. And in this case, he actually talks about what Benjamin Mays said in 1951 in challenging the civil rights leaders. He made a note that he was challenging them against being, quote, respectable, and he also said, quote, social, intellectual, and economic security tends to make leadership conservative and complacent. Kimbrough said in 2019 when he wrote this piece, is that, you know what? Today, quote, like Benjamin Mays, of every race and gender, mentoring a new generation of prophets who will confront the issues of today while providing insights and guidelines for a better future. That's what he's saying that leaders should do. They should be bold. They should be echoing the concerns that need to be said. And Benjamin Mays was challenging the civil rights leaders to get up and do something rather than just stand there. Now, I will give you an example of bold steps on presidential leadership from a university president that can be found in two opinion pieces, both written by President Patricia McGuire from the Trinity Washington University, a university where the majority of students are African American and has a significant Latinx population. In one article that she focuses on recommendations for how America can atone for their long history of racism. And in this case, she mentioned, quote, to make real progress in eliminating the structures of racism that depress the enrollment of black students and universities need to move from, quote, this is all quote, gestures of good intention to real transformation. Universities need to develop develop entirely new approaches to admissions, curriculum, and pedagogy, support services, and measurements of academic success that are not seat time in one place. She also wrote a complimentary opinion piece that focuses on accountability and diversity. President McGuire notes that the use of performance metrics such as the college scorecard may miss the point. And speaking to the decision to remove the accreditation of the all-female HBCU Bennett College, McGuire stated that, quote, we know that Black and Hispanics often find themselves marginalized in higher education, especially when they confront the issues that accompany race and social class in America. The pervasive problems of race and gender discrimination that thwart opportunities and outcomes and undermine the confidence necessary for academic success and the cumulative effect of poverty that plague low-income students trying to find their way through the collegiate labyrinth challenge the all too many young women that face who are truly on their own trying to figure out how to raise children and also support families while conquering calculus and Plato, end quote. Now, as an aside from those two articles, I pulled up some data since this opinion piece was about metrics. So here are some metrics that we tend to overlook regarding the achievement of HBCUs. 60% of all engineering degrees, 70% of all dentist and medical degrees, 50% of all teaching degrees to African Americans in the US came from HBCUs. Furthermore, 50%, that's right, 50% of all African American professors in non-HBCUs come from HBCUs. And I'm saying that to also say like I said, I didn't know what my good president was going to do last night. I'm saying that to also say we're thinking about the missions of tribal colleges, women colleges, Hispanic serving institutions in the same breath, that their spirit is centered around this particular commitment. And actually, it's a push to all the rest of the universities of saying, you want to figure out what works, you don't need to go far. So early in this presentation, I talked about a peace-building process that the Center for Social Justice, and by the way, there is material at the booth about that as well, just like the call for papers. Coggins and Lasky in 2017 wrote in their opinion piece about the power of dialogue in a similar dialogue project they launched between the Colorado College and the United States Air Force Academy that created opportunities for conversations across diverse backgrounds, conservative and liberal, urban and rural, military and civilian, to express and share with each other differences of opinion. And in this democratic dialogue project, they, quote, press the students through screenings, followed by shared meals, campus exchanges, and organizing debates to talk about preferences in robust ways. She notes that as professors, it's my throat that's talking. As professors, we are not simply or even primarily training specialists to earn PhDs. I know someone out there saying, you know, some of my family's probably saying right now, what about that water? Just saying, it with me in spirit. I love you all very dearly. The water, right? We are preparing students to interact meaningfully and democratically with the world, and the world consists of people of different ideologies, race, ethnicities, heritage, and creeds, end quote. So now our colleagues are challenging us, and continuing this piece, Coggins and Lasky, that our colleagues here in this piece is challenging us to do more than just teach and research. Rather, to take on the known toxicities of the world, both by modeling civility and preparing our students to accept differences in the world around them. All told, these reflective pieces from the Chronicle on Higher Education speak to the importance of academic leadership and taking on the charge of pushing the envelope to foster social justice both inside and outside of the academy. At the same time, our colleagues are challenging each of us to recognize inequality while creating a space for civil discourse from diverse populations. The articles from the Journal on Social Work Education encourages us to embrace the notion of liberatory consciousness in our teaching and scholarship. Oh, by the way, I was supposed to show you that little slide there on the right, power of dialogue in the opinion pieces. So let's go on to. So remember before, I started earlier with the pastor's prologue, and so I will be moving into, in essence, the last part of our segment for the next few minutes. And actually, before I do that, here we go, right? I think that I'm going to share with you that something that one of my pastor, David Anderson, said 10 years ago, and I was like, "You sure President Sorrell didn't hear that sermon about the theme song?" And basically, you know, I was like, "Wow." He said to us, "What is your theme? What is that song you want to have played in your head, in your spirit, when you walk into a room?" Now, I noticed last night, I was actually sitting in the back, so I was behind a beam, and the president couldn't find me if he wanted to. I'm just saying. But I would have given him something, just saying. Yet, the thing about it is, because part of this is really how do we build ourselves up inside. And so when we think about a theme song, it's not one, it's many different kinds of themes, right? And so before we move forward, right, I'm gonna share with you, I didn't even share with my colleagues, right? So I talked to students this semester, about this thing about the theme song. And they're like, so Dr. C, what theme song did you use? Well, as it turns out, in my transition to Georgia in 2015, I said, now I love music, all kinds of music. I was like, I got the perfect song. James Brown's I Don't Want Nobody to Give Me Nothing. Just open up the door, I'll get it myself. And check it out. See, James Brown was very big on economic and cultural self-determination. And what I was saying to myself with that theme song is, I love y'all. I love my colleagues who are out here in the presentation here. I wasn't asking you for a handout when I took the job. I'm good. Just don't block me in the name of helping me or saying you're my brother or my sister. No. I understood that. Now, okay. So before we go to the next phase, though, and actually I gotta have another plug before I go to the slide that's gonna play something. The next piece that I'm gonna play, I kind of thought about something from 2019, and I also have to give my props to my friends at Morgan State University, not for them per se, but I lived in Baltimore for 2 decades. And even here on Saturdays when I can, I try to listen to Reggae Roots and Culture, which is strictly about message music and reggae, from 10 to 12. Look, I gotta make sure I get ready for every week, so in that vein, let's see if this thing plays.
We have the ability to erase poverty. We are the future, and that is everything. A world of conflict, you're not necessary. Most of humanity living.
So while that song was really the Morgan Heritage clip was channeled towards youth, because when you hear the whole song, they're singing to youth, I'm like, let me pull out the piece that talks about all of us. We are the future. Us, our children, our grandchildren, those who are yet to be born. So, now that I played this, we're going to go on to some of these icons in my non-scientific view that represent people from all walks of life that are daring and bold. In part, some of these are self-liberation, and some of these are persons who just tagged along with other people who were doing that liberation piece. So, I'm going to talk about that we need more Marcus Garvey battles, and I'll talk about that in a second. And I'll tell you why I said Marcus Garvey as opposed to Mark Battle. Manning Marable, Bella Abzugs, Harvey Milks, Megan Rapinos, Molly Diaz's, Joshua Wong's, Spike Lee's, and Tony Cade Bombara. Now I make a note, I will try to cover these. And if Dr. Robinson kicks me off the stage before I finish, I understand. You'll at least get some of them, right? So let's start with the social work pioneer. And here you have on the slide, on the left is Mark Battle, and on the right is Manning Marable. So I'm going to start with Mark Battle, who was also another one of my mentors. And I'll just talk for a tiny second about his trailblazing administration with Mark Battle Associates in the 1960s as an African American firm. his being an executive director of NASW, and his coming to University of Maryland to start something in 1992 was unheard of. The Social Work Community Outreach Service having a social work agency in a building that is now a generation later just part of the norm. And those things were, bold. Yet I'm actually going to talk about one of his mentors. Mark and I love Mark. Mark and I have had many conversations, and one of his favorite mentors was Dr. Howard Thurman. Now, Dr. Howard Thurman had mentored a generation of civil rights leaders, including Dr. King, in applying the principles of nonviolent civil disobedience to promote fairness and equity. Quote, "There is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have. And if you cannot hear it, you will all of your life spend your days on the other end of strings that somebody else pulls." Isn't that a powerful quote from Howard Thurman? In his own gentle space, he's telling us to be true to our own voice. So like the theme songs that I pulled before is, you gotta find that voice and allow it to be your steward. So in terms of a trailblazing academic scholar, Manning Marable, well actually Manning Marable took on the civil rights leaders and challenging them to do more. In a statement, Dr. Marable said, quote, "The we have overcome generation has run out of intellectual creativity, but refuses to leave the political stage," end quote. Now, that was a direct call to the leaders to do more. And I will say that did not make Dr. Marable one of the favorites of the same progressives that he had fought to support. Yet, when we think about his work and this consistency of scholarship, at the time of his death, Dr. Marable had completed a biography of Malcolm X entitled Malcolm X, The Life of Reinvention, for which he won the 2012 Pulitzer Prize. His books are just brilliant. He just pushes the envelope. So, let's move on. Let's go on to, don't you love Bella Abzug's hat on the left? gotta know Bella. So let's move on to social activists. We have Bella Abzug, Harvey Milk, and Megan Rapinoe. Bella Abzug, a central figure in the women's liberation movement, crystallized the movement and how it represented as it related to women with this quote. She said, quote, "Our struggle today is not to have a female Einstein get appointed as an assistant professor. It is for a woman Schlemiel to get as quickly promoted as a male Schlemiel." Now, Schlemiel meaning awkward or unlucky. And what she was really saying here is that it's, she said this in the 70s. It is just as true for social work education today. We want fairness for ordinary citizens. That's what she was saying. I'm like, oh. It's like, and I sort of dropped the mic, boop. In the case of Harvey Milk, we have the spirit of someone who just got up every day and, quote, represented. Harvey Milk said, quote, "All over the country, they're reading about me in a story that doesn't center on me being gay. It's just about being a gay person who's doing his job." So what Harvey Milk was saying is, look, I just get up, I go out in the community, I work out in the community, everybody knows what I'm about. And just quietly in that space. Now, on the other side, not so quietly, we have our sister Megan Rapinoe, and you need to watch some of the YouTube clips. That's all I have to say, right? She's a contemporary example of a spokesperson who's fighting for equality on and off the playing field. Her efforts focuses on challenging the President of the United States, make sure I said that, to be inclusive of all Americans of all backgrounds. She's put herself out there unapologetically. So then, don't you love it? On the left is Marley Diaz, and on the right is Joshua Wan. This is an example of new generations of folk. Let's talk about Marley, for example. She is the founder of and this is a 13-year-old, just want to let you know. She's the founder of the Pound 1,000 Black Books, a campaign to collect 1,000 black books about black girls and girls of color as the main character and send them to her peers. Just want to let you know, she succeeded in sending out 10,000 books. Right? So how this got started was that she was very frustrated about seeing the lack of, I got 4 minutes, ha ha. 6 minutes, Dougie Fresh, you're on. Hey. Yeah, so with Marley, she said that she had several choices. Option 1, focus on me, get myself more books, and have my dad take me to Barnes & Nobles and just be done. I live my perfect life in suburban New Jersey. Option 2, find some authors, beg them to write more books, and so I'd have some of my own special editions. Treat myself a bit. Or option 3, start a campaign that collects books with black girls as the main character, donate books to communities, develop a resource guide to find these books, talk to educators and legislators about how to increase the pipeline of diverse books, and lastly, write up my own book, which so that I can see black girls collected in books collected, and also my own book, and have the stories reflected there. Now, I'm actually gonna, because I was told I don't have time, I'm gonna go to Spike Lee and Tony Cade Bambara. Now, these are examples of artists in the community who were unappreciated by their work. Let's take Spike Lee. 2019 is the 30th anniversary of Do the Right Thing, the film that focuses on racial inequality and how it fostered a conflict in a predominantly African-American community in Brooklyn, New York, just me and my sister talking, that 30 years later still crystallizes the racial conflicts that are going on in our community. Inspired by the motivated killings of a black man entitled Michael Griffith and the elderly black woman named Eleanor Bumpurs, which was killed by the New York City Police Department, Do the Right Thing served and still serves as a window into a country that is still, where we still devalue the lives of African Americans. Now note in 1989 when the movie came out, Spike received lots of criticism for inciting a riot, being racist, and the film pointed out examples of racial microaggression as well as black love, family affirmation, and pride. 30 years later, it is seen as the number 82 of the top 100 films that have ever been put out. Now, my favorite liberator is Tony Cade Bambara, who called herself a cultural worker rather than writer, teacher, activist, or social worker. She, quote, devotes her work to the belief that the artist's job is determined always by the community that she serves. Notice how she said that, the community she serves. One of her famous works was the videography of the bombing of Osage Avenue, where she captured what the police department and Mayor Wilson Goode was doing that was destructive in the black community. And you know, that's not making her a favorite. And note, by the way, there's an institute at Spelman College where every year they do a tribute to Tony Cade Bambara. So, one last quick example, then I'll give my concluding paragraph. So finally, in 1972, and you don't see a picture for this, I want to talk about Ed Roberts, who's the founder of the independent living movement. And Roberts and other members of the Physically Disabled Students Program came together in Berkeley to found the Center for Independent Living, an advocacy group that fought for changes that will give persons with disability access to community life. Now, their fight in Berkeley to deal with curb cuts and access, wheelchair access, started a national movement. And so for his work and his teamwork, it became a national icon. So here we are. In conclusion, I've just provided examples of liberation and liberators from different walks of life that suggest one could be a writer, an artist, an activist, a mobilizer, or just a face in the crowd. In the end, maybe Guevara was right, even about liberating. People liberate themselves. So I promised I would end this presentation the way I started. Turn to your neighbor, say, it's not about me. Thank you. Now I just follow. Is someone taking pictures? Oh. I see, be in the middle. See, turn the black around. Turn the black around. Oh, no. Come on now, you playing. I don't like you play too much.
Okay, let's read it.
You want to read it?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, please, yes.
The Council on Social Work Education, Commission for Diversity and Social and Economic Justice, Carl A. Scott Memorial Lecture given by Dr. Llewellyn Cornelius, October 25th, 2019, 65th Annual Program Meeting, Denver, Colorado.
Dr. Francis, my mentor, Dr. Francis, please.
He gets to do his thing.
Right.
This is for you.
This is
Very nice.
so.
And Darla?
Presidentas.
Dr. Stark?
Es muy importante, people. Just come on up. So this is the moment where they do their thing, and then if you want to come up, we do our thing. You just got to send me the photos. I'm just saying. Dr. Francis, my Virgin Islanders soulmate. Don't get it twisted. Thank you. Come on board. Come on down, right?
We're all going to share some love.
Yes. I receive the love I'm receiving. Thank you.
Congratulations and thanks so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Any more pictures for you, Dr. Cornelius?
Well, Dean
Dean
Cheyette
Cheyette.
and Associate Dean Miller. Like I said, it's like a wedding ceremony. So after that, is that the official finish of the photos, and then we stop and anybody wants to take pictures? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
She's asking him permission for what she can do anywho.
Not violating anybody's space.
There's no family here right now, right?
All right. We want to thank you for attending this Carl A. Scott lecture. This brings us to the close of our program, and we hope we see you around at some of the other activities.
Okay,
Now we got to do.